Hi, I'm Andre from HPOO, and in this video I will show you how to create synchronous loop steps in OO Designer, the web-based editor of Cloud-Slang workflows. Let's jump to the designer. Pressing on the designer on the CSA's workflow section will get us there. I already created a project and a flow in order to be able to exemplify the synchronous loop. Let's start by first understanding what this flow does. I called my current flow execute workflow because it does one simple task. It triggers through the help of OO REST API a workflow identified by its UUID. As you might have guessed, the trigger workflow can reside on another OO environment, but today we'll not cover that. So moving on top of what I mentioned, the execute workflow is waiting for the triggered flow to complete and is getting to success only if the triggered flow completed successfully. If not, it goes on a separate response that I called other. Just briefly, if I run this flow in Central, and let's go there because I already deployed my project, you see I can provide a UUID and trigger the flow. The flow starts running and so does the triggered flow. The flow keeps waiting and eventually finishes with success because it identified a success. Now imagine that I want to use the execute workflow and be able to trigger a collection of other workflows. And I want to do it synchronously, thus wait for each triggered flow to complete. Can we do that? Of course. One way to do it is to write a synchronous loop. Let me show you how. I create an additional flow where I drag the execute workflow. Now I simply go to the toolbar section above the flow panel, I click on the last button and select loop. Two things already happened. The step was marked as a loop step by the loop icon, and more than that, loop inputs were added on top of the step inputs. These are the inputs that will help us achieve the desired end result. I will use the for input to put a variable, while in the in input I will define a collection of items. For this case, the list of UIDs to be triggered. For the easiness of the exercise, I will hardcode the list here. The UUIDs I'm using here are Cloud-Slang based. You might not be familiar with the format, but hopefully we'll cover that in another video. So now the execute workflow, as a synchronous loop, is supposed to take every item from the list and do whatever he already does, and that is triggering and waiting for the flow to complete. The flow UID will get the I variable, so each time will trigger a different item from our collection. Pretty much that's it about the loop. But wait, I originally said that I want to trigger flows, and if one of those flows do not complete with success, I want to stop triggering and take separate action. So it means I basically want to break out the loop. And I can do that. I simply select break, I pick the other option, and that's it. Now I will move on to wiring success to success. I will also wire other to send email. It means that I want to have someone notified in case something goes wrong. I still want to expose some outputs and pass some values to the email step. So let me do that, and afterwards we'll get back to trigger the flow for the first time. I think I'm done. Let's trigger the flow. First, we deploy the project to Central. Now let's trigger. I hard-coded the UIDs of 4 workflows, and our flow is supposed to trigger them on the same Central. Let's see what will happen. The first flow is being triggered. Our own loop waits for it to complete, and eventually we'll move to the others. The third one failed to complete, so the execute workflows completed too, while of course the fourth flow was no longer triggered. If we check the actual execution, we can see the sequence of events as expected. And I should have an email. This was a small example of how we can use loop in our designer. We loop synchronously over a collection of comma-separated items. Of course, you can loop over different types of collections, but we'll not cover that. Just keep in mind and check the documents. Hope it helps. Thank you for watching. You can find more videos and guides in our community.